Allie Buchman with the Potomac Bead Company, and I'm going to show you a sweet little earring today, and then check out a video coming for the pyramid necklace as well. This is the Nefertiti earring, who was a lost Egyptian queen, so maybe we found her pyramids here. But we are using a check glass 6mm pyramid, and it's flat on one side and has the point of the pyramid on the other. We're going to be playing up that point and working with some seed beads in order to make this fun little earring. This came about after an inspiration piece, just playing around with beads and having fun and working and seeing what we can do. So you can see how something simple became something a little bit more complex. If you need any of these materials for the Nefertiti earrings, you can look on the left-hand side of this video here. We'll have a little drop down so you can order any of the beads if you need to online from us at potomacbeads.com. You can also check out below the video here under the description for a list of the materials that you can get in any of your local Potomac Bead Company stores. For these earrings, I'm going to be using two pyramids. The pyramid color that I've chosen to use for the project here is the alabaster terracotta copper. It has a little bit of a coppery and purple hint to it. It's the way that that coating goes on the alabaster white glass. And I'm going to play that up with my 11-0 seed beads. The 11-0 seed beads, which I have here on my mat, are the white Lila Vega beads. They're a nice kind of deep plum purple. It is a check coating on the Miyuki seed beads, so it's really going to play up that purple color that has a hint on the pyramid. To brighten up my project a little bit, I'm using 15-0s in the in the crystal Labrador color. And that's going to make a nice bright silver addition to that kind of darker beads that I'm working with. I also have a teardrop, and the teardrop we're going to be using 7 teardrops per earring. So you're going to need 14 altogether of your teardrops. If you don't have teardrops, you can use 8-0 seed beads, or 2mm fire polished rounds would look nice as well. So keep in mind you can change out some of the different materials for this. In addition to all of my beads, because I am doing an earring, I have my ear wires, and I'm using surgical steel ear wires. If I'm doing earrings for gifts or for other people, I usually use the sterling silver or the surgical steel if I'm going for that silver color, because that way you know they're not going to give ear allergies to people that are sensitive. Because this part doesn't come near the ear, I just have a silver-plated wire protector or wire guardian that I'm working with here at the top in order to make my earring move around and swivel around a little bit more. I am working on my bead mat, and I'm working with 0.006 Wildfire beading thread in white. For this project, I am going back through a fair amount of my 11-0 several times, so it gets a little bit tight. I did my first example with a size 10 needle, but I did need to pull a little bit with pliers, so I'm going to switch for the demo here for a size 12 needle. So you want to grab out one of your size 12 needles. Thread-wise, this does take about 2.5 feet of beading thread, so you'll want to get ready and cut 3 feet of beading thread just so you have some extra. You may want to have a needle nose or a flat nose plier handy, as well as your thread burner to burn down the edges as we get to the end of the earring. Go ahead and cut 3 feet of your beading thread and put on your size 12 needle, and we'll get ready to get started making the Nefertiti earring. To get started, again, what I've done is I've taken 3 feet of my beading thread, put on a size 12 needle, and then I've added a stop bead to my project. I just need about 1.5 inches to 2 inches of thread after that stop bead in order to tie off my project there in the back of my earring. So I'm not worrying about leaving a ton of thread here at the end. To do a stop bead, I just pick up a bead that's near my bead mat, and I'm going through the bead 2 times with my needle away from that tail. That bead is then going to come off the project, so I usually use a bead that's not part of my project so I don't mistakenly sew through it again. The first thing we're going to do is frame out our pyramid bead. I'm going to do that with my 11-0 beads. I'm going to sew through one of my pyramid sides, doesn't matter which. And when I'm coming out the side that the holes are right next to one another, I'm going to add 3 of my 11-0 seed beads. I'm going to sew through the other hole of the pyramid so that those beads will be exposed on the side of the pyramid. When I get to the other side, same thing, I'm going to add 3 11s to my needle, and I'm going to sew through the opposite hole, which is going to be right next to my stop bead, and the bead and needle, or the needle is going to come out right next to the 3 beads that I first put on. You want to make sure not to sew through any of your beads as you're working with it, because we're going to be working around those beads. Once I'm on the side, I'm going to pick up 7 beads in order to wrap around the side of my pyramid. So you want to pick up 7 11s. And I'm going to sew around the pyramid, coming out this top hole. I'm going to go to the bottom of that same hole and sew up towards the thread, which is going to create a circle, and have those beads lay on the side. Next, what I'm going to do is sew through those 3 beads there on the corner. I'm going to sew through my pyramid, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So I have my 7 beads on, and I'm going to go around in a circle again, sewing through from one side of the pyramid to the other side of the pyramid. The beads are going to sit off the pyramid a little bit, and we're going to be pulling those all in together as we work on them. To pull them all in and to make them look more cohesively around the unit, I'm going to sew through all of those beads, not the pyramid, just all of the beads on the side. So I'm sewing through all the beads from one side, going the whole way across, the 3 on the side, as well as around the whole circle, picking up those 7 beads too. Altogether, there are 20 seed beads that we added onto the project. That's going to be important because we're going to be picking up beads and treating them as groups of 5. We did 7 on one side and the other side, that's 14, plus 3 and 3, 6 more would be 20. After we sew through all of these beads, again, 5 beads are going to be considered on each side of our pyramid. The reason I sewed through all of these was to make them closer to the pyramid. That stop bead, if you want to, and you can, you actually want to push down below the project so you're not staring at it and it's just kind of hanging out underneath. Once I do that, I'm just going to pull nice and tightly and make sure all of those beads wrap around my pyramid. Once those beads are wrapped around the pyramid, the next thing we are going to do is we're going to create our edges and decorate the edges of the pyramid. We'll then come back and add some of the extra 15-0s that are here on the sides. Again, we're creating the groups in groups of 5. When you're looking at the bead, there are going to be 5 beads to each side of your pyramid. So there's the 4 sides of the pyramid, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew through my beads until I come out of one of those groups of 5. The groups of 5 will be then at the corner. So right here I'm at a corner, and I'm at a corner of one of the groups of 5. To add my points and to get my first teardrops in place on 3 of the sides, I'm going to add 1 15-0, 2 11s, a teardrop, and then the opposite, 2 11s, 1 15. So that it lays right over top of the project, I'm going to go back 5 beads and sew around in a circle, bringing those beads to lay right on the top. So the thread's coming out here at the bottom of those 5 beads. I add my bead pattern, and then I sew back down through those 5 beads. And that's going to create my first little point. Continuing on, I'm sewing through the next 5 beads on the side of my pyramid, coming out in one of the corners. I'm going to do that pattern again, 1 15, 2 11s, drop, 2 11s, and a 15. Again, my thread is coming out at the bottom of a group of 5 seed beads. I add my pattern on, and then sewing down from the top, I'm going to sew back down through those 5 beads. One more time, spin over, sew down through the next 5 beads. So I'm at a corner, add my pattern of 15, 11, 11, drop, 11, 11, 15. Again, go back through those 5 beads that you just sewed down through. And that creates my third little point there. The last area on the point, what I'm actually going to do is add my wire protector, so that way I have something for my beads to sit on when they're on the ear wire. You could do a loop too if you want to. I just really like, for the fluidity and for the motion of the earring, that it has a wire protector at the top. To add the wire protector, I'm going to sew through that last set of 5 beads. When I'm on the side, I add one of my 15s, 2 11, and then I'm going to sew up through one of the loops of my wire protector. The wire protector, if you haven't used them before, they're U-shaped, and they have a little channel for your beads, or for your thread to sit inside, so the thread is not rubbing against any metal or any part of your clasp or closure. My thread and needle then are going to come down the other side of the wire protector, and I'm going to make sure that my thread lays right inside that tiny little U shape of the wire protector. On the other side, I do 2 11s and a 15, mimicking the drop. So in place of the drop is just the wire protector. Other than that, the pattern is the same. And then I sew back through those 5 beads. That gets us the whole way around the circle, which is a nice, simple, fun, plain earring. If you wanted to, you could keep this design and just have a simple earring. But if you want to make it a little bit more complex, we're going to continue on, adding in the rest of our teardrops and the accents of our 15-0. The next portion of my Nefertiti earring that I'm going to add is the rest of the drops, as well as the decorated 15-0s on the sides. To add my drops, when I'm coming out the 5th bead in my group of 5 beads, I'm going to sew up through the silver 15-0. Once I'm out of that silver 15-0 and my needle's coming out towards the exterior of the project, I'm going to add in one of my drops. I want to then sew down the next 15-0, so I'm sewing between the 11 and the 15 down towards the project. That's going to pop that teardrop right there on the side. I'm going to sew through the first bead in my set of 5 beads on one of the corners there, that first corner to the right. When I'm coming out there, I want to position my teardrop so it sits correctly. And then I'm going to add these 3 15s. The 3 15s get added, and I'm going to sew over 3 of the 11s in that base row of 5. My needle then is going to go into that 5th bead and out. So I'm coming out of bead 1, I'm adding 3 15s, and I'm sewing into bead 5. Once I'm through there, I'm going to sew up my 15 on the side. So I'm coming out between the 15 and the 11. And my next drop, sew down the 15, so that way that teardrop hangs out on the side. Next one around, go through the first 11, come out between beads 1 and 2 in that group of 5, add 3 15s, sew through bead number 5 in that row of 5. Those 3 beads then that I just added, just push them on top towards your project. When I get to the corner again, I'm sewing up through a 15, adding a drop, sewing down through the 15 on the other side, and at the same time, because you're catching on, I'm sewing through the first 11. Once I'm through the first 11, I add my 3 15s, sew through the 5th bead in that base line of 5. Push those 15s in, give the thread a tug. When I'm out the corner here, again, sewing up the 15. When I'm out the corner, I add my drop, sew down the 15 through the first bead, and add my 3 beads, just like I did the rest of the way around. Once I'm ready to add these last 3 beads, I'm going to sew through bead number 5 and come out right at the corner. When I'm at the corner here, I'm going to add the addition of 1 15-0 just to sit right on top of that teardrop. So I'm out the corner of a group of 5, I add 1 15-0. I'm going to sew through bead number 1 and come out right after that first bead. So I'm always coming out of bead number 1 and I'm always sewing into bead number 5 of that row. That decorates and puts a little point on that corner. Here inside of my loops, I'm going to decorate with an 11 and a 15, sew through the teardrop, just the teardrop. You want to make sure those beads go right to the front of the drop, and when you're coming out the drop, you're going to use a 15 and 11, sew through that 5th bead. So we're doing the same, we're sewing through the same beads that we did as we were going around and adding our 3 15s on top. This time though, we're adding the beads that are sitting right next to the teardrops. That's also going to pull your project a little bit stiffer and keep it in its shape. The only difference is when you come out the corners, you're adding 1 15-0. Sew through that first bead and come out. Add an 11 and a 15. Sew through the drop. Push that down into that place if you need to. Add a 15 and a drop once you're through the teardrop, and sew through bead number 5. This is why I said you needed to use a size 12 needle, because you're sewing through beads 1 and 5 a fair amount of time. So it got tight with my size 12. It did work, or with my size 10. It did work, but it did get very tight. I add my 15-0 on the corner there. Coming out after bead 1, I add my 11, 15, sew through my teardrop, and I'm almost done. You always want to make sure those beads stay to the top. Add my last beads here. Go to that last corner and decorate that last corner with my 15. The teardrops also, when you're working with them, this is just a little side note, sometimes they have really big or really thin bases. It's just the way that they're produced. So if you do have some that have a really fat base of the drop or a really narrow, pick those out, save them for another project, and try to use consistently shaped drops. I add that last 15 and I sew through bead number 1 right next to that group of 3. The last thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to knot off my project in the back. So the project is completely finished now, and again I'm just going to end it. To end the project, what I'm doing is I'm taking my thread and needle It's towards the front, but I'm going to push it to the back. So it's still coming out of bead 1, and I'm just pushing it towards the back of my project. So that way you don't see it. I'm going to then be right next to my stop bead. I'm going to take my stop bead off, and all I'm going to do is simply tie those 2 thread ends together. So it ends perfectly placed to do your knots and to get rid of your thread. I'm doing 3 knots, and then because this doesn't have a ton of tension because it's an earring, I'm not going to worry about gluing it. What I am going to do is take my burner and just burn down the edges, balling them up a little bit. So I leave a little bit of space right at the edges there, and then I'm just going to let that ball up by burning it down towards the project. And that's going to prevent that knot from slipping out. If you don't like that balled up look in the back of your earring, you can also cut it down smaller. And because of my color of my pyramid, you don't really see it that much, and it really is to the back of the earring. The last thing I'm going to do is add my ear wire. To add my ear wire, I am going to open up the ear wire and slide it to the side. It's an eye pin here at the ear wire, and I'm going to take my pliers. I'm going to twist it rather than pulling it back to open up that ear wire. Slide my earring on and close it up. And there you have your Nefertiti earrings. So they're really fun to make, very simple and very quick to do. Like I said, it's inspired me to do a pendant that looks like it as well. So that way when you're wearing your earrings, you can have a pendant. I'm going to do those with the bigger pyramids, but it's a fun way to use and to play with some of the pyramid beads. There's a couple different examples out there that I have putting them on bracelets. These are cute earrings to wear with it. They look really complicated, but they're pretty simple to make, just lots of sewing around that same bead. Again, if you do need any of these materials for these Nefertiti earrings, you can go back to the beginning of the video where we do links to gather them all, or you can go to the description under the video here to the show more button, and that will drop it down so that you can get any of these materials. You can go to potomacbeads.com, check out our locations page, and go to the nearest Potomac Bead Company store near you. You can also feel free to interact with us on our Facebook pages, show us what you're doing and what you've done, and we'd love to hear from you, what products you want to see, what ideas you need videos on, and so forth. If you would like to get videos like this regularly updated, you can also subscribe to this YouTube channel to get video updates about products, about patterns and designs, and new things that we're doing and things that are happening with the Potomac Bead Company. Thanks everyone for watching, and enjoy making these Nefertiti earrings.